isn't exactly a big deal, but I'm being indicted? I'm not being indicted, but there's a chance that a lot of YouTubers and content... Anyways, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that. Dan Schneider is suing his haters in epic style. And that's not good for me because I am a Dan Schneider hater. There's a reason that this creepy motherfucker has so many videos made about him. It's very weird. And there's also a reason his name is Dan Show Me Your Feet Schneider. Dan Schneider is a name that you've definitely seen recently over the last couple months. If you've been taking a chance and paying some attention to the negativity that's been coming out of the world a lot and stuff, his name really has some buzz. And you can see if you go on Google Trends, Dan Schneider. There we go. If we go to this here, you get him, it's seeing when how he's become relevant, and you go here, March 23rd. Oh, interesting. That's a lot of Googles. This is the day that an episode of the show called Quiet on Set was aired, and it really kind of took Dan Schneider's name and kind of made it bad because a lot of people are saying a lot of really bad things.
Working for Dan was like being in an abusive relationship.
Dan's treatment of people on his shows was an open secret.
He's a brilliant mind that's behind some of the greatest children's television of all time. I mean, all that. iCarly, Drake and Josh, Victorious, The Amanda Show, Zoe 101, Sam and Cat, Keenan and Keel. The dude is an entertainment powerhouse. At least that's how he'd like to be remembered. But unfortunately, the show, Quiet on Set, painted him in a drastically different picture.
My lawyer filed complaints, gender discrimination, hostile work environment, harassment. And it was so devastating.
How safe can any kids be in that environment? There would be even bigger problems down the line with actual on set.
And YouTubers have been painting him in a drastically different picture, myself included, by the way, for a long period of time. Starting with Dan seemingly treating kids like adults, it would progress and graduate into something more obscene. I also remember seeing that Robert Downey Jr. is like a whistleblower or something, and he's got this like fake alias, some alias on a forum, and he's like a man behind the curtain blowing the whistle on wood or something. That was back in 2017, so doesn't seem like that's the case. Iron Man has fallen off. If the stories about him are true, why hasn't anyone exposed him publicly or at least privately? Why is he still allowed to work with children? Surely he's a liability to Nickelodeon if the allegations are true. See, that's sort of where I lie on it, right? Like, it definitely looks creepy. It's definitely really weird, and he's certainly a bizarre guy, and he is just like not likable and all that stuff, but innocent until proven guilty by a court of law, right? Dan Schneider is allegedly a P that turned out a lot of those Nickelodeon stars, including Amanda Bynes. There was a celebrity most think is Robert Downey Jr. who outed him on CDan blog a few years ago. I cannot believe that I actually remembered that shit. That's so funny. Anti-Dan Schneider sentiment has reached a fever pitch over the last month and a half, I'd say, even though it's been, he's been sus for about a decade, over a decade now. Look at this guy. And then this guy said, yes, 12 years later. Dan's legacy has wholly shifted from being a legacy of endless creativity, a legend amongst children's television, to a legacy of hostility, sexism, and alleged abuse. Allegedly, until proven in court. For real though, it's not funny. The show Quiet on Set, I'm an idiot, by the way. It's a very dark show. We're a month and a half removed from it now, and it's just disturbing. It's incredibly disturbing. No one's really that surprised by it, I'm sure, but it definitely put into the zeitgeist negative information of Dan. And now that's kind of the common sentiment amongst Dan viewers, is that he is a creep, weirdo, and allegedly. Quiet on Set has been a massive fucking deal, and there's been an equally massive response and sort of backlash, I guess, since the docuseries came out and showed everyone all these disgusting and vile behaviors, some of the stuff that's been going on behind the scenes at Nickelodeon shows, including a show that DS was involved in. He was the showrunner, okay? A brief recap of what the docuseries covered and why now Dan Schneider is suing Quiet on Set for defamation. Okay, it's very important. He would play favorites in the cast, and if you were someone that he preferred, you could do no wrong. But if you weren't a favorite, you were expendable, essentially. There's even footage of cast members talking about how they were out once Amanda Bynes came on. They're no longer favorites, from Dan Schneider.
When Amanda joined the show, the new favorite had arrived. I was out.
He had infamous freakouts where he would stomp on the ground and roll around in circles like a pill bug.
Dan was like a tornado. He'd come in and like, you'd be like, wow, okay, what just happened? Dan showed up.
One former star, Raquel, talks about a time in which the crew brought her out a birthday cake and he had a freak outenheimer on that, guys. Very strange. This is a Watch Mojo video.
Why'd you get her that cake? Like, that's a big cake. Like, she didn't need that big of a cake. And I was just like,
Miss Ballou was not invited back after this, and there was no explanation. We believe it was because of the birthday cake. And then you compare that to when he brought a cake out on the set for iCarly when Miranda Cosgrove had her 18th birthday, and he gets real odd and strange, and this is what a lot of people make their thumbnails of. God, it is so creepy.
I mean, honest to God, I could go on and on about all the wonderful qualities about Miranda, but I know time permits, and I will consolidate it to just this one thing.
That is really weird. That's very strange. I've got to say, that's weird. If I was an adult man, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have said that. Top comment, Creepy Dan back at it again, 5 years ago. It's a long time it's been happening. He also allegedly, I don't know why this is really alleged necessarily, but he behaved in ways that were misogynistic to female writers on set. He would degrade them, he would yell at them, he would degrade them, he would make them feel less than. There were also 2 writers that shared one salary, and Dan said that was a normal thing that happened a lot.
I remember speaking to the line producer, and she said that I was going to have to split a salary with a writer that I did not know.
so they were getting 2 for the price of 1. They were going to hire 2 women and have them share a salary. And I never saw it happen to any of the men.
So yeah, real bad look for Dan. Real bad. And it just kind of propagated the whole rumors to another fucking level. Like, I'm talking another level. To the point where if you're going around asking people for their opinion, you know, giving out a poll as to whether or not DS is a P word, it's gonna be a solid 95% sure. For sure, absolutely. And then maybe 5%, I don't know who that is. And then he responded, and it was such a bad, terrible response.
Dan, how are you?
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
He responded and was interviewed by a former cast member who launched some incredibly softball questions at him, and it was just really bad, and it was picked apart massively by everyone again. Not good. Comments got turned off. Poor guy.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. And even additionally, I apologize to the people who were walking around Video Village or wherever they happened, because there were lots of people there who witnessed it who also may have felt uncomfortable. So I owe them an apology as well.
But he's now suing them for defamation. So that's where we're going to get into it. And it's a bit of the weeds. I'm going to be honest, guys. It's a bit of the fucking weeds. And I feel like I should probably get a lawyer. To be honest, I feel like I should have a lawyer. Just kidding, I have a lawyer. As you can probably imagine, the response was very poorly received. 17,000 likes, 213,000 dislikes, and comments obviously turned off. He got ratioed massively. And now he's filed a defamation lawsuit against Quiet on Set producers. And his main claim is that the docuseries falsely portrayed him as a sexual abuser. Now, if he would have led with this, I feel like it would have been a bit of a different story in terms of the public reception of Dan Schneider, because this is definitely a more sort of cut and dry response to being called something you're not, if you're not that thing, is to sue those people for defamation. And to be fair, though, the lawsuit doesn't really mean a lot either. Obviously, a lot of information will be subpoenaed, I assume, and we'll figure everything out, and people are gonna have to back up their claims. So that's gonna be good. We'll be able to actually find out what happened, hopefully, as a result of this. It's weird that he didn't just lead with this, though. Maybe he feels jaded by his own favorite former stars condemning his response and unfollowing him on Instagram. A lot of people unfollowed him and Nickelodeon on Instagram. Maybe he's just having one of his infamous freakouts, and this time his lawyer was on board and they are suing the producers of Quiet on Set. I'm not sure, but a lot of people did not accept his original apology, and maybe this is just what he feels like is the only result, the only thing he can resort to at this point. This fella, Jack Salvatore Jr., did not accept his apology. He was a cast member on iCarly.
My name is Jack. I was a child actor on Zoe 101, one of this guy's shows. I also worked in his production department as an intern on iCarly, and I worked in the writer's room on Salmon Cat and Victorious. This Max documentary that was recently released did a really good job of uncovering the details of workplace toxicity, specifically on Dan Schneider's shows for Nickelodeon. We could talk about the massages. We could talk about the fact that he would literally count his gold coin collection in front of his crew who was living paycheck to paycheck. We could talk about how sometimes he would bring out a shotgun to scare one of the writers when they were working at his house. We could talk about the high-level conversations I wasn't supposed to hear about how Nickelodeon didn't want to recommend antidepressants for Jeanette McCurdy after her mom died for fear that she might kill herself and make the network look bad. But what I do want to talk about is never letting this stuff happen again. This is an entire industry built on hope and dreams and adrenaline and wish fulfillment. And that can be a very dangerous thing for megalomaniacs to wield. Even in posting this, I'm a little afraid. Is this going to screw up my career moving forward? I have no idea, but I think it's important and it needs to be said. Because if my silence ensures the perpetuation of environments I don't want to work in anymore, then what is the point of working in them? And until Homeboy goes on 60 Minutes to answer some questions from some real journalists and not a cast member of his who he's paying to be there, apology not accepted.
And now I'm not gonna just reiterate what this guy says, but you can listen to this. He drops a lot more information on it than I feel comfortable with saying. Because gold coin collections? He used to bring out a shotgun. Now on to the lawsuit, and by God, Dan is coming out fucking swinging. I love reading lawsuits. He's got Mosner Legal on the job. Okay, guys, Sullivan and Worcester LLP. The lawsuit lists multiple entities, including Warner Brothers, Sony Pictures, Maxine Productions, Mary Robertson, Emma Schwartz, and also 50 unnamed does. 50 unnamed does, 50 other fucking people. And that's important to us content creators because it kind of looks like it might be some YouTubers on there, or content creators, or people online with aliases. So Maxine Productions is the main production team that put out Quiet on Set, and Mary Robertson and Emma Schwartz were the founders of that. So it's really levied towards them, Sony Pictures, and Warner Brothers. The show. They're suing the show. And both Emma and Mary are a part of Sony Pictures nonfiction group, and they haven't really done much aside from Quiet on Set. They did Dr. Death, Cutthroat Con Man, which sounds fucking stupid. And they also did a show called June. So I don't really know what the fuck's going on. The beginning of the lawsuit contains a little bit of what every single great lawsuit contains, and that's a bit of a glazing for the defendant. The plaintiff, the defendant, the plaintiff. The plaintiff. I got my law degree from YouTube University, all right, during that whole Johnny Depp thing. Fuck, that shit was crazy. Schneider, a well-known television producer, creator, and a writer responsible for some of history's most beloved children's television shows. That's true. I will say that is true. That's high praise. That's some Nick Cage high praise, but also accurate. I mean, those are some good shows. The lawsuit then goes on to claim that the portrayal of Dan on Quiet on Set was just a hit job. It destroyed his reputation and his legacy through the use of false statements, implications, all that Dan was a sexual abuser, and something that he claims he is not. Hence the gigantic lawsuit. The lawsuit also says that they did all this for clickbait, ratings, views, and money. That's what he's saying. That's the base of the lawsuit against the entertainment companies, television companies, those two ladies, and the yet to be named 50 does as well. Part of me thinks that these 50 does are YouTubers, TikTokers, creators, content creators, whatever, whoever covered this story and weren't careful with their words and weren't like, allegedly, or who weren't talking about the story specifically. There are a lot of people, I saw a lot of people just being like, yes, Dan Schneider is a P word. I'd like to think that I'm not guilty of that, but this is definitely a game that I'm playing, and I'm trying to get better and better and better and better at it. But by God, that would be funny if my name showed up in this lawsuit. That would be some good content. Another even larger, thicker part of me believes that these are YouTubers because they go by fictitious names that are just placeholder till the legal team has ascertained the legal names of these characters.
1 through 50, inclusive, and therefore sued by the defense by such fictitious names. Plaintiff will amend this complaint to allege the true names and capacities and send defendants to the time is certain day.
I mean, you could probably go to 500, not even just 50. You could sue probably 1 million of YouTubers and TikTokers especially, dude. I saw some insane shit on TikTok. Now, the first piece of evidence that is cited by the lawsuit comes from a YouTube video, so this could perhaps even be further evidence that YouTubers are fucking cooked in here. You know, maybe not. I assume not. It would be really interesting, though, to see a bunch of YouTubers get sued for something like this. My assumption, by the way, is that the truth would come out and we would all know the exact reality of the situation, so it's kind of a... I wouldn't say a good thing, but it's going to be an interesting thing to say the least. The trailer for Quiet on Set heavily implies that Dan Schneider is a P word. Pretty negative trailer, so I get why it's cited as evidence for this defamation claim.
In the early 90s, Nickelodeon was kid everything. And you better hope that your house had cable.
Wasn't there to educate you. We were there to have fun, to get slimed, to be entertained.
And this is when Dan Schneider arrives, Nickelodeon's golden boy. He created these shows that were hugely successful for them.
No one had ever really done sketch comedy starring kids for kids.
He launched the careers of child actors who became major stars.
For 20 years, he shaped children's entertainment and culture.
Hey, thank you for being here.
But that marked one of the darkest chapters.
Specifically, the first 38 seconds of that video are highlighted there's a YouTube, it's a link that's really funny. They believe that these words imply that there is an involvement of Dan committing crimes with the people who are in this show, a true crime event, because it's like a true crime thing, but it's not. So far, it's the only criminal is the convicted who were on the show. So I get it, I see what they're saying. True crime event, Dan Schneider. They're saying he's an abuser of kinds. Not good. So this is when it gets kind of wild. Okay, little Charlie Kelly, Always Sunny type, you know, really reaching here. Trailer cuts to footage of a female writer talking about how Dan's treatment of people on the show was an open secret.
Dan's treatment of people on his shows was an open secret.
And they relate the usage of the phrase open secret to a 2014 documentary film titled An Open Secret, which is a film that exposes abuse in the film industry specifically and implies terrible, horrible things to Dan. I'm not sure if that's what they meant. I think the phrase open secret is pretty commonly used, especially when people are kind of pieces of shit and everyone doesn't like them and it's an open secret and there's an elephant in the room and a broken clock is right twice a day still. Dan's team also takes great offense at the question that's asked in the trailer, how safe can any kids be in that environment? Followed by being even more upset with the following statement, there would be even bigger problems down the line with actual pedophiles on set, implying that he is...
There would be even bigger problems down the line with actual pedophiles on set.
So yeah, makes sense. The lawsuit sort of plays it out. I can see how you definitely would watch that and be like, well, this guy seems like a piece of shit. But also you just look at any video on YouTube about Dan Schneider from the last 12 years, and you could also see that as well. There's a lot of people who feel this way. It isn't a new thing from this website, from this film. I said website. It is this Quiet on Set. It's crazy and it's fucked up, and we learned about Drake and all this stuff. All that sort of came out, or rather was an open secret. They're definitely cherry picking it. Makes sense. But they're also absolutely cherry picking it because they claim that 70 seconds of the trailer, he's the sole focus, but a lot of it is about these fucking three guys. They say actual P words and then it goes to these fuckers. So it's, to me, it clarifies it that he's like, you know, there was some abuse, etc. But that's a broad term right there. These guys are the actual freak fuck. It also, in my opinion, validates the question, how can any kids be safe in that environment when you do actually have 3 P words present on set? How can any kid be safe in that environment? Dan's a showrunner and there's 3 P words. Dude, what the f? Dan and the 3 P words. That's not a safe environment. That's a dangerous environment. And if I was a parent, I feel like I'd get really angry. and act like an ape. And instead of coating myself with onion as a natural insecticide, I would coat myself with the blood of my enemies. Definitely creepy. I see what they're saying in the lawsuit, but at the same time, I feel like the trailer is very compelling and also relatively clear in that Dan is creepy as for sure, but there's bigger problems, and those problems luckily have kind of legally been dealt with, but they still persist. It's pointing out bigger issues is the whole point of it, right? That's the whole point of it, I think. That's what I took away with it. The lawsuit also goes on to call out probably the most rational and valid point in regard to the trailer, which is that the actual P words, only one of them is named, and it isn't even their full name. There's no context given. Over 2 minutes in, they say Peck. Peck was coaching the victim. That is Brian Peck, the guy who abused Drake Bell.
11 charges of child sexual abuse related to a child actor.
His image isn't shown, whatever. So basically, they're just talking about Dan Schneider, who is a bigger name, and then they're also talking about actual P words, and he believes that everything is being conflated there, which to me, that's the most rational point, I would say. I would say that definitely makes a little bit of sense, but it's definitely sensationalized, and with a functioning brain, you can certainly discern that it is exactly that. It is sensationalized, and Dan Schneider is a big name. He's a big name when it comes to being creepy as in Nickelodeon and fostering environments of weirdness and potential abuse. He's a showrunner on shows. He's the guy. He's the fucking guy. You know, he's got to be able to take responsibility for these kind of things if they come out, especially if there are actual pedos kind of under you. If you're fostering an environment that's not exactly conducive to the safety of children, as alleged by Quiet on Set, I feel like it's a valid trailer in my opinion. I mean, I don't fucking know. Shit, bud. 51 on that list, Jane Doe. I'm 51. Fuck. So those are the complaints that are levied at the trailer. There are also complaints for the individual episodes as well. The lawsuit alleges that in episode 2, they imply that like Jason and Brian, 2 convicted actual felons, Schneider was also a bad guy like them, okay? And they do this by comparing a line that's used to describe Jason Handy, an actual convicted F word, with a similar line used to describe Dan in episode 1. So yeah, I don't know how much of a reach that is, but oh well. Finally, they go on to allege that in episode 5, the show Quiet on Set insinuates heavily that DS is a P word because they show his face when talking about actual convicted felons. There's a part when they're discussing updating laws that anyone who's ever been convicted of harming a child should never be able to work in Hollywood on a Hollywood set again, which I agree with that. Why the fuck not? Sure, why not? Yeah, sure, or just anywhere. Then they follow up that idea, that hypothesis, by describing the loopholes that allowed Jason Handy and Brian Peck, 2 convicted abusers, all right, to slip through. They follow up on the loopholes, and they show Dan's face instead of Jason or Brian's faces. So yeah, common to editor L. Kind of coming all together, it makes sense. The lawsuit claims that the defendants acted with malice, with a purposeful disregard for truth, and they even refused interviews with witnesses that didn't fit their narrative. So yeah, it's coming together, right? He's built his lawsuit. I'm really excited to see how it goes, to be honest. And I don't know how I feel about that claim. I don't see any sort of evidence provided, which it doesn't have to, I suppose, until the actual lawsuit goes through, but we'll see what happens here. I do know that in the show, they gave Dan the chance to refute claims. I mean, there's a bunch of little tiny pieces that say, Dan Schneider claims he never once considered gender while hiring. Dan Schneider denies Jenny's claims and states that he had no control over salaries. Dan Schneider denies he was pushed out of the writer's room and claims he needed to focus his energy on another show he was creating at the time. And then he also acknowledged it all in his apology. So I don't know what the fuck's going on. It's very confusing now. I remember earlier, by the way, I said people with a functioning brain might be able to see the trailer and see that it isn't just a direct insinuation that Dan Schneider is a P word. But really, that's the whole point of the lawsuit, is that it is possible for the average person to misconstrue information, even if it's provided succinctly and clearly and all right there before you. People tweeted shit like this: arrest Dan Schneider. Dan Schneider behind bars. Dan, get in the van, Schneider. I hope that Dan goes down like R. Kelly and Harvey after their docuseries. I watched. Dan Schneider, Brian Peck, and Jason Handy need to be in prison. So yeah, one of them is not convicted, right? Dan is seeking from the defendant in his prayer for relief compensatory damages in various forms because his career is destroyed, punitive damages, attorney fees to be covered, Quiet on Set to be taken down or edited. to remove all that's been covered in the lawsuit, which is pretty huge. On top of just the show, which you could argue that is fair and concise and is a net positive, there are a lot of YouTube videos that just pretty much say that Dan is a P word.
Nobody talks about it.
It's the big secret.
And it's widespread?
Oh, yeah. I was surrounded by them when I was 14 years old. Surrounded. Literally. Didn't even know it. It wasn't until I was old enough to realize what they were and what they wanted and what they were about and the types of people that were surrounding me till I went, oh my God, they were everywhere like vultures.
I mean, genuinely. Like, there's a lot of content out there that spawned from Quiet on Set that uses imagery, clips of interviews as proof that he is someone who should be in jail for crimes that a lot of people would consider to be the worst type of crimes, I would say. For sure, what's clear is that it wasn't that great of an environment, judging by the response of a lot of people who worked on the shows with this guy as showrunner. He didn't exactly facilitate the best environment for them, which that's common. I feel like that definitely happens. And he also created an environment that allowed for predatory behavior to transpire. I don't know how much control a showrunner has, but I'd like to imagine that it's a lot, and you know, some responsibility should be taken there. And it did seem like he took some responsibility in his little apology video thing, but at the same time, it's all just weeds, man. It's hard to tell exactly what the he thinks, because this is like the antithesis of that apology, in my opinion, the defamation lawsuit. On top of that, we can definitely say that he ain't beating the creep allegations. He's a creepy motherfucker. He loves feet. iCarly, a lot of shots at children's feet. Victorious, a lot of shots at children's feet. He requested feet pics. He'd tweet feet pics. Guy loves feet, and that is inarguably a F word. Okay, guys? That is inarguably an F word. Tweets like this: Charlie tickles Sam's very unusual toes. If you have a moment, will you please name Sam's toes for us? I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what are you talking about? And, really to tie it off, though, since Quiet on Set came out, the systemic nature of these problems has kind of come out and been put to a head, which I think was the point of the doc anyways. A lot of people are talking about shit. Former Nickelodeon cast members, not shows produced by Dan specifically, but yeah.
One of the horrifying things that happened in my experience with Nickelodeon was when Nickelodeon sent computers over to production when we were starting filming the show, and when they were turned on, there was child.
She goes on to say that Nick sent computers over, and when they turned on the computers, there was CP on them when they were turned on, which is absolutely insane. Another cast member for the Naked Brothers band, which was one of my favorite shows when I was a little guy. I used to imagine being in the band. Anyways, she posted a TikTok talking about how she had to kiss a 30-year-old man when she was 14 or 15 years old and was traumatized. I just can't even imagine this shit, dude.
I kissed this greasy ass, dusty ass dwarf. I'm sorry to this man, but I did not want to kiss him. Also, guys, I'm 4'11". He's a 30-year-old man. I'm sorry, I couldn't even watch it. It gave me fucking the ick. I couldn't. And it honestly gives me PTSD. I'm watching this Quiet on Set documentary, and it's talking about how integral and vital it is to create, especially when it's like a kids cast, to create an environment where kids feel comfortable to say no, or I don't feel comfortable with this. And then I'm like, yeah, maybe they do express that, though. It's also more important to create an environment that listens to the kids and actually does not make them do things when they don't want to do them. Because they made me kiss this 30-plus-year-old man when I was like, what, 14, 15?
It's important to note there are monsters everywhere. Very clearly there are monsters in Hollywood. There are monsters in children's television shows. And Dan certainly is not the worst of all of them. Absolutely not. I'm excited to see how the lawsuit plays out. Definitely did some weird shit when he was there. Absolutely. You cannot argue against that. And he is deserving of criticism in regard to all of those things, in my opinion. Yeah, ultimately, I think Quiet on Set did good. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm excited to see how the defamation thing fucking plays out here.